The first thing I noticed when we walked into the banquet hall was the cake. It sat on the center table like an accusation, white frosting with pale pink rosettes piped around the edges, and I already knew it was wrong before Linda opened her mouth. "You ordered this?" Linda's voice cut through the chatter of arriving guests. She stood directly in front of the table with her arms crossed, the sleeves of her champagne silk dress catching the overhead lights. "Mom's 70th birthday, and you buy a supermarket chic cake." I set my purse down on the NEA rest chair and kept my voice even. "I called Mom last week and asked what she wanted. She said she'd like to try strawberry this year. I have the order confirmation on my phone if you want to see it." Linda laughed, short and sharp. "You called her? Mom's been eating chocolate birthday cake for 50 years. She told me herself last month that she wanted the same German chocolate from Publix she always gets. You either didn't ask, or you just didn't see enough to remember." Our mother-in-law, Irene, sat at the head table with her teacup balanced on her knee, watching the exchange with the faintly removed expression she always wore when Linda and I read off. Tom, my father-in-law, busied himself with unfolding his napkin and smoothing it across his lap. Neither of them spoke. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the call log from the previous Thursday. "Look, here's the call. 7 minutes, Tuesday afternoon. She told me herself." Linda didn't even glance at the screen. "You probably asked her what flavor cake she wanted after she'd already taken her sleeping pill. She's not exactly sharp at night, you know that." I felt heat creep up the back of my neck. The accusation stung more than I wanted to admit, not because it was true, but because Irene was sitting right there and still hadn't said a word to back me up. She lifted her teacup to her lips and took a slow sip, her eyes drifting toward the window where the parking lot was filling with arriving cars. "Linda, it's just a cake," I said. "If Mom wants chocolate, I can run down to the bakery in the shopping center and grab one. They're open for another hour. You and everyone else can start with appetizers while I'm gone." She tilted her head, the diamond pendant at her throat catching light. "Run down to the bakery." "Right. Because that's the look we want for Mom's 70th. A last-minute grab-and-go from the strip mall." A few of the closer relatives had stopped talking to watch us. Mark San from Raleigh set her wine glass down and leaned in like she was at a tennis match. I could feel the weight of their attention pressing against my shoulders. Mark was still at the bar, talking to his cousin, oblivious to what was happening at the cake table. "The cake is fine," I said, though my voice was rooting to thin around the edges. "If anyone asks, I'll say it was my choice. Mom and I discussed it. That's the truth." Linda reached out and pushed the cake box a few inches to the left, as if she couldn't stand to look at it anymore. "Do you know how much I spent on her 60th 3-tiered fondant with hand-painted orchids? The baker drove it up from Miami in a refrigerated van. She cried when she saw it." "Cried. I remember. You showed me the pictures. Then you know what a real birthday cake looks like." Linda's voice rose just enough to draw more attention. "You've been right into this family for 5 years now. 5 years. And you still show up to the big events like you're stopping by after work. No effort. No thought." My hands root to shake, so I pressed them flat against my thighs. "I made kai tins for everyone last Christmas. 40 dozen kais. Each box tied with ribbon. Mom hugged me and said they were delicious." "Kais," Linda repeated, as though I'd said I'd brought a bag of potato chips. "She has a kai jar full of those in her pantry. They're still sitting there from last Christmas." Irene finally set her teacup down and cleared her throat. "All right, girls, that's enough. People re-looking." Linda smiled sweetly at her mother. "Sorry, Mom. I just hate to see you get shortchanged on such an important day." She reached over and patted Irene's hand, then turned and walked to the bar to order a drink, her heels clicking across the tile floor like punctuation marques. I stood frozen beside the cake table. The room had gone back to its low hum of conversations, but a few lingering glances told me the exchange had been witnessed and catalogued. Marques aunt gave me a tight, sympathetic smile that made my stomach turn. Irene looked up at me then, her expression blank. Next time, just get the chocolate. It's easier that way. The words landed like a slap. Mom, I called you. You said strawberry sounded nice. You said change is good. Irene blinked once, slowly. Well, I was probably just being polite. You know how I am. No, I did not know how she was. Every time I thought I had her figured out, she shifted sideways and made me feel like I'd imagined the entire conversation. I looked at Tom, hoping for some intervention, but he had buried his face in the appetizer menu and seemed determined not to resurface. Mark Ape read at my elbow, his hand settling against my lower back. Everything okay, he murmured. I turned to him, swallowing the knot in my throat. Your sister just reamed me out over the cake. He looked at the cake, then at the bar where Linda was leaning against the counter with her gin and tonic. She does that. Ignore her. That's what I usually do. But your mother just said I should have gotten chocolate anyway. She said she was being polite when she told me strawberry. Mark's jaw tightened, just the rest clench of muscle beneath his skin. He didn't say anything for a moment, but his hand pressed a little harder against my back. We'll talk about it later. Let's get through dinner first. I nodded and took my seat at the table. The place CARDS had been arranged with careful attention to social hierarchies, and I found myself sandwiched between Mark's grandmother, who was NARLY deaf, and his uncle from North Carolina, who had already sta root on his second scotch and was not interested in conversation. Linda seated herself at the opposite end of the table, surrounded by cousins who laughed at everything she said. The appetizers came out. I pushed a shrimp around my plate and watched Irene at the head table. She was laughing at something Tom whispered in her ear, her hand resting on his forearm, looking for all the world like the doting matriarch of a happy family. Then Linda stood up and clinked her glass with a butter knife. Everyone, attention please. Her voice right easily across the room. Before we get into the main course, I have a little announcement. Some of you already know, but for those who don't, I've been working on something special for Mom. She reached into her purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. The room quieted with anticipation. I glanced at Mark, who had stopped eating and was watching his sister with an expression I couldn't read. After months of sea urching, Linda continued, I found the perfect retirement condo in Miami. Right on the water. 2 bedrooms, balcony facing east, brand new appliances. And I decided to buy it for Mom. A ripple of applause traveled around the tables. Irene brought her hands to her chest and made a show of dabbing her eyes with her napkin. Tom patted her shoulder, beaming, it's fully in Mom's name, Linda added, lifting her voice over the murmurs. No strings, no cosigners. Just her home away from home, whenever she wants to escape the Georgia winters. Wonderful gesture, Mark's aunt murmured to no one in particular. I looked down at my plate. The shrimp had gone cold, the tails curled into pale pink commas. Linda had not mentioned that she was using money funneled from her parents' joint account to pay for that condo. She had not mentioned that the deed was actually in her own name, not Irene's. And she certainly had not mentioned that she had been draining her father's retirement fund for the better part of 3 years. Mark's hand found mine beneath the table. He squeezed once, hard, and let go. The main course arrived. I ate mechanically, the food tasting like Bowie Road. Every few minutes I caught snippets of conversation drifting from the other tables. So generous of Linda, she always had her mother's best interests at heart. Mark's wife must be feeling awkward, you know, with the cake and all. By the time the plates were clear red and the cake was finally wheeled out, I had developed a throbbing headache behind my eyes. The staff had sliced the strawberry cake into neat squa residential and arranged them on little china plates. Linda accepted hers with a gracious smile and took a tiny, performative bite, making a show of savoring it. Actually, she announced, this isn't half bad. Maybe Mom was onto something with this strawberry idea. Irene laughed and helped herself to a large slice. See, Linda, I do know how to try new things. The table laughed along. I sat motionless, watching them rewrite the evening's narrative in real time. It wasn't that Linda had been mean to me. That was expected. It was that Irene was letting her get away with it again, and everyone around them was pretending not to notice. Mark pushed back his chair and stood up. The scrape of the legs against the floor was louder than it should have been. Conversations stuttered and stopped. Even Linda paused mid-bite, her fork suspended. I'd like to say something, Mark said, but his voice was calm, measured, the same tone he used at business meetings when he was about to deliver bad news. I recognized it because I had heard him use it exactly 3 times in the 5 years we'd been married, and each time it preceded something that changed the shape of our lives. Irene frowned. Mark, now's not the time, it's exactly the time, Mom. Everyone's here. The whole family. That's the point. He pulled a folded sheaf of papers from his jacket pocket and laid them flat on the tablecloth. I caught a glimpse of a letterhead from a law firm in Midtown. I've been working with an estate planner and a geriatric CARE specialist for the past few months. I have a proposal for your long-term CARE. Linda's fork clattered onto her plate. What long-term CARE? Mom's not sick. She had a mini-stroke last month in the grocery store parking lot. Mark's voice was flat, unyielding. She hit a fire hydrant and told me it was because she was distracted, but the EMTs did a field test and said her reaction times were concerning. They advised her to see a neurologist. She didn't go. Irene's face had gone very pale. Mark, I told you that in confidence. You also told me you'd go to the doctor the following week. You didn't. You canceled the appointment and you've been avoiding my calls about it ever since. Mark turned to his father. Dad, you knew about this. Did you make her go? Tom's mouth opened and closed. He looked around the room as if hoping someone would rescue him, but no one stepped forward. I thought she'd take CARE of it herself, he finally mumbled. She always does. Always does. Mark repeated the words slowly, and they hung in the air like indictment. Mom, you've been covering for Linda for years. I know about the joint account withdrawals. I know about the down payment on that Miami condo, and I know it's not in your name, it's in Linda's. Linda shot to her feet. That's a lie. Bank statements don't lie. Mark slid the papers across the table. I have copies of every transfer from the joint account to your personal checking, going back 38 months. Total comes to just under $190,000 Rs. The room had gone completely silent. Even the grandmother, who was nearly deaf, had caught the tension in the air and sat frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. Irene's hands began to tremble. She clutched the edge of the table as if to steady herself. Mark, we can discuss this privately. No, Mom. We're discussing it now. Because Linda just stood up and made a grand gesture with money that's yours and Dad's. She bought you a condo with your own savings, and then she told everyone she was being generous. Mark looked at his sister with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Did you think no one would check? Linda's composure cracked. The smooth, polished surface of her public persona splintered into something sharp and panicked. Dad gave me that money. Dad signed off on every transfer. It was his choice. You manipulated him, Linda. You told him it was an investment opportunity. You told him you'd pay it back in 6 months. That was 3 years ago. Tom finally spoke, his voice thin and shaky. She said she needed the help. We wanted to support her. She's our daughter. She's their daughter, Mark repeated, turning back to the table. And I'm the son. The one who's been paying their cable bill for the past 2 years. The one who fixed the leak in the roof last spring and didn't charge them a dime. The one who has been calling Mom every single week to check on her, even when she doesn't answer. I felt TRS prick at my eyes, but I blinked them away. I had not known about the cable bill. I had not known about the roof. Those were small secrets, the kind of quiet labors that went unnoticed because they were never meant to be noticed. Mark had been rang all of this alone. The main door of the banquet hall swung open and 2 paramedics walked in, rang a portable gurney. I looked at Mark in confusion, but he didn't seem surprised. He had made the call before the Pa Rudy even sta rude. What is this? Irene's voice rose to a pitch I had never heard from her. What's going on? You need a full medical evaluation, Mom. I've already arranged for you to be admitted to Emory for a neurology consult. They're expecting you. Mark stepped aside to let the paramedics approach the table. I love you. But I love you enough to stop letting you pretend everything's fine. Linda lunged forward, her arm extended as if to push the paramedics away. Don't touch her. Mark, you can't do this. This is kidnapping. It's medical guardianship, Mark said calmly. I have a temporary order from the court, filed this morning. Because you and Dad have been financially exploiting her for years, and because she's no longer capable of making sound decisions about her own CA. The judge agreed. The room exploded into chaos. Tom was shouting, Linda was screaming, and Irene had begun to cry, ugly, gulping sobs that tore out of her chest. The paramedics moved with practiced efficiency, taking Irene's arm and guiding her toward the gurney. Mark stood in the center of the storm, utterly still. His hands were at his sides, his shoulders straight. When he turned to look at me, his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. Rachel, he said. Can you drive us to the hospital? I don't think I can do it right now. I got up from the table, leaving my cold plate of food and my half-empty water glass behind. Linda was still screaming somewhere behind me, but the sound had become muffled and distant, like noise through a closed door. I walked over to Mark and took his hand. His fingers were cold, and they trembled against my palm. Yes, I said. I'll drive. We left the banquet hall together, walking past the paramedics who were securing Irene onto the gurney, past Tom who had collapsed into a chair with his face in his hands, past Linda who was already dialing her husband's number in a frantic whisper. The autumn air hit my face as we stepped outside. The parking lot was dark except for the amber glow of the streetlights. I could see the ambulance parked near the entrance, its red lights flashing silently against the brick facade. Mark stopped walking and looked up at the sky. There were no stars visible through the city light pollution, just a flat gray-black canopy. I should have done this years ago, he said. I was too afraid to hurt her feelings. Too afraid to make waves. And while I was being afraid, she was funneling their money away. You did it now, I said. That's what matters. He turned to face me, and I saw the cracks in his composure that he had hidden from everyone else. His shoulders sagged. His jaw unclenched. He looked exhausted in a way that went beyond tiredness and into something more bone deep. What happens next? I asked. The doctors will evaluate her. If they confirm the cognitive decline, I can get permanent guardianship. The condo sale will be frozen until the assets are reaccounted for. Linda will have to repay what she took. He paused. And Mom won't speak to me for a long time. Maybe never. I'll speak to you, I said. I'll always speak to you. He let out a shaky breath and pulled me into a hug. His arms wrapped around my shoulders, and I buried my face in the collar of his jacket and felt him breathe, slow and unsteady, against my hair. The ambulance doors closed on Irene. The paramedics root the engine. Mark pulled back and looked at me, and something in his expression had softened. Just a little. Let's go, he said. We can figure out the rest of it tomorrow. We walked to the car, a beat-up sedan with a dent in the passenger door and a cracked cup holder. I slid behind the wheel and turned the key, and the engine coughed to life. Mark sat beside me, ring straight ahead at the RER bumper of the ambulance. I reached over and put my hand over his, and he turned his palm up so I could lace my fingers through his. I pulled out of the parking lot and followed the ambulance onto the main road. The red taillights blinked ahead of us, threading through the Atlanta traffic. Rang Irene Tower a hospital where she would finally get the care she needed, whether she wanted it or not. Mark didn't speak again until we reached the hospital entrance. Then he leaned his head back against the headrest and closed his eyes. Thank you, he said. For not running away. Where would I run? I asked. He smiled, a faint, sad thing that barely touched his mouth. Somewhere without all of this, probably. A place where nobody's family gives you a hard time about cake. I squeezed his hand. That place doesn't exist. And even if it did, I wouldn't want to go there without you. He opened his eyes and looked at me, and for the first time that evening, his smile looked almost real. We sat in the parking lot, engine idling, watching the paramedics wheel Irene through the glass doors of the emergency room. The automatic doors slid shut behind them, and the orange glow of the ER lights swallowed her small figure whole. Everything that happened next would be rider than I could probably imagine. But sitting there in the dark car with Mark's hand in mine, I knew something I hadn't known when we walked into that banquet hall just hours ago. We were going to be okay. Not because the secrets had stopped coming. Not because everything was fixed. But because we were finally facing them together. And that was enough to start. The hospital waiting room smelled like stale coffee and antiseptic. I sat in a plastic chair with my hands folded in my lap, watching the clock above the admissions desk tick through the minutes. Mark had gone to speak with the neurologist, and he had been gone for over an hour. A nurse came through the swinging doors and called out Irene's last name. I stood up, but she was looking past me at a man in a suit who had arrived while I was ring at the clock. He introduced himself as the hospital social worker and asked if I was family. I said I was the daughter-in-law. He gave me a clipboard and told me to fill out the intake forms while we waited. I sat back down and root writing. Irene's date of birth. Her primary physician. Her medications. Most of it I knew from the emergency contact card she kept in her wallet, the same one Mark had shown me when we first root dating, and I was still learning the basic facts of his family's life. Linda had not arrived yet. Neither had Tom. I had called Mark's father from the parking lot and left a voicemail telling him which hospital we were at, but I had not expected him to come. He had been silent and pale when we left the banquet hall, and I suspected he was doing what he always did when things got uncomfortable, retreating into his workshop or his television or whatever corner of the house allowed him to pretend reality was not happening. The swinging doors opened again, and Mark emerged. His tie was loosened and his shirt had come untucked on one side. He looked drained, but his shoulders had relaxed a fraction. They're admitting her, he said, sinking into the chair next to me. The neurologist reviewed the CT from tonight and said there's some evidence of small vessel disease. They want to keep her for observation and run more tests in the morning. What does that mean? It means she's been having mini strokes for a while without anyone noticing. The memory issues, the confusion, the poor judgment. It all fits. He rubbed his face with both hands. The good news is it's not Alzheimer's. With medication and lifestyle changes, the progression can be slowed. But she needs supervision. She can't go back to living alone and driving herself to the grocery store. I set the clipboard aside and turned to face him. What about Tom? Mark let out a humorless laugh. He's not going to be much help. He didn't even know how many pills she was supposed to take every morning. I asked him last week, and he said he thought it was just the little white ones. I left him a voicemail. He won't come. He's probably already opened a bottle of bourbon. Mark leaned his head back and stared at the ceiling tiles. I spent the past hour on the phone with the social worker and the admissions office and the insurance company, trying to get everything arranged. And while I was doing that, my sister called me 7 times. I let it all go to voicemail. 7 times she's panicking. She knows the assets are refrozen and I'm going after the condo. She called her husband, and he's smart enough to tell her to hire a lawyer, which means she's going to come at me through legal channels. He turned his head to look at me. I'm not worried about the law. I have documentation. But she's going to make this ugly, Rachel. She's going to bring up things about us, about our marriage, about things that don't matter, just to distract from what she did. What things? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she's going to bring up the fact that I lost my job 5 years ago, right before we got married. She's going to say I'm not financially responsible enough to manage Mom's estate. She's going to paint you as a gold digger. The word hit me like a slap. She doesn't even know me. She knows you're not from the same kind of background she grew up with. That's enough for her. Mark reached over and took my hand. I'm telling you this so you're prepared. She's going to try to get you to react, to say something you regret. Don't give her the satisfaction. I nodded, though my stomach had begun to churn. The waiting room felt smaller than it had before. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the coffee machine gurgled in the corner, and I felt trapped in a space where every wall was closing in. I'll be fine, I said, though I was not entirely sure I believed it. Mark stayed at the hospital through the night, catching fitful sleep in a recliner in Irene's room. I went home around midnight and lay awake in our bed, ring at the ceiling, replaying every word Linda had said at the Pa Rudy. The cake. The kies. The years of small slights that I had swallowed and ignored because I thought keeping the peace was the right thing to do. Around 3 a.m, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up and saw a text from an unknown number. I opened it. Nice move tonight. You think this is over? Mom is going to hate you both by the time I'm done. She'll never forgive Mark for the ambulance. And she'll never forgive you for standing there and letting it happen. I blocked the number and put the phone face down on the nightstand. My hands were shaking. I lay in the dark and listened to the house settle around me, the creak of floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator. At some point I fell into a restless sleep, and when I woke up, the sun was just beginning to lighten the edges of the curtains. I went to the hospital the next morning. Mark was still in Irene's room, slumped in the recliner with a coffee cup balanced on his knee. Irene was awake, propped against the pillows, and she looked smaller than she had the night before. Her hair was matted against her scalp, and the hospital gown made her shoulders seem narrow and frail. She did not greet me when I walked in. She turned her head toward the window and kept her face turned away. Mom, Rachel brought breakfast, Mark said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. I'm not hungry. The words were flat, dismissive. I set the paper bag of fruit and yogurt on the bedside table and pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed. You should eat something, Mom. The doctor said it's important to keep your strength up. She did not respond. Her hand lay on the blanket, pale and thin, the blue veins visible through her skin. I had never seen her look so fragile. At the party, she had been the center of attention, dressed in her best lavender dress with her silver hair coiffed. Now she looked like someone who had been hollowed out from the inside. Mark stood up and stretched. I need to go talk to the social worker again. Can you stay with her for a few minutes? I nodded. He squeezed my shoulder on his way out, and I watched him disappear through the door, leaving me alone with Irene and the silence that had settled between us like a wall. A long minute passed. Then Irene said, still facing the window, "You knew, didn't you, about Mark's plan?" "Not all of it. He only told me the night before the party. And even then, he didn't tell me about the ambulance." "So you were just an accomplice instead of the mastermind." "That makes you feel better." The words stung, but I had expected them. I took a breath and said, "Mom, I know you're angry. I would be angry too, if I were you. But Mark did this because he was worried about you. He has been worried about you for months. He should have asked me first. He should have come to me privately. Instead, he humiliated me in front of everyone I know." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Those people saw me being wheeled out of my own party on a stretcher. Do you know how that feels?" "I can imagine." "No, you can't. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. You don't know what it's like to lose control of everything you've worked for." She finally turned her head to look at me. "Those savings I put away for yours. Every time I clipped a coupon. Every time I wore an old dress to a wedding instead of buying a new one. I was saving for my old age. And now Mark is going to take it all and give it to some nursing home in Florida. He's trying to make sure you're safe. He's trying to punish Linda. That's the real reason. He's always resented her, and this is his way of getting back at her." Irene's eyes were wet, though her voice had grown harder. "You don't know the history between them. You don't know how much I sacrificed for Linda that I couldn't give to Mark. Then tell me." She blinked, riled by the offer. I sat forward, keeping my voice calm. "Tell me about the history. Tell me why you've always given Linda more than Mark. I'm not going to judge you. I just want to understand." Irene was silent for so long that I thought she was going to refuse. Then she let out a slow breath and looked down at her hands. "When Linda was born, she was premature. She almost died. Spent 3 weeks in the NICU. I sat by her incubator every single day, and I promised myself I would never let anything bad happen to her again. And Mark was healthy. He was a big baby, 9 pounds, no complications. He didn't need me the same way Linda did." She paused. "I know how that sounds. I know it's not fair. But when you spend years terrified that you're going to lose a child, something changes in you. I could never stop worrying about her. And Mark, he was so capable, so self-sufficient, I always told myself he would be fine." I let the words settle between us. They made a kind of terrible sense, even though they were unjust. Irene had been so busy protecting the child she nearly lost that she had neglected the one who had been strongest. And Mark had grown up learning not to need her, because needing her only led to disappointment. "Does Mark know this?" I asked. "I've never told him." "He wouldn't understand." "He might. If you gave him a chance." I reached out and touched her hand, the one resting on the blanket. "Mom, I'm not going to pretend I'm not angry about the way you've treated me. At the party, when Linda was going after me about the cake, you could have defended me. You chose not to. That hurt." Irene looked away. "I know. But I'm here. I came to the hospital because you're my husband's mother and you're sick. That's what family does. I squeezed her hand gently. You can hate me if it makes you feel better. You can blame Mark for everything. But at the end of the day, he's trying to save your life. Linda is trying to save her own bank account. That's the difference. She did not answer. But she did not pull her hand away either, and that felt like a small victory. Mark came back an hour later with news. The neurologist had completed the preliminary assessment and confirmed the diagnosis of vascular cognitive impairment. It was manageable, but Irene needed to start medication immediately and undergo regular monitoring. The hospital recommended a transitional CAR facility for the first few weeks. I've already made arrangements with a place in Buckhead, Mark said. It's close enough for us to visit every day, and they have a good reputation for geriatric rehab. Irene did not protest. She had been silent since our conversation, and when Mark laid out the plan, she simply nodded and turned her face back toward the window. Mark looked at me with a question in his eyes. I gave him a small shrug and a nod. We would talk about it later. Outside the room, in the quiet corridor, Mark leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. She hasn't spoken to me since I came back. What happened? I told her you're trying to help her. I told her the truth about Linda. I paused. She told me about Linda being premature. About the NICU. Mark's eyes opened. She told you that. I think she's rooting to realize that she can't control the narrative anymore. She's red, Mark. She's losing her grip on things, and she knows it. That's why she lashed out. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I've known about Linda for years. I knew she was the favorite, and I made peace with it. But I never knew the reason. Mom never explained. I always assumed it was just because Linda was the girl. Maybe that was part of it. But the NICU changed something in her. She told me she's been afraid of losing Linda ever since. Mark nodded slowly, processing. That explains a lot. The extra tuition money. The CAR. The condo. She was trying to buy insurance against loss. Which is why she can't see that Linda is the one taking advantage of her FAR. I reached out and touched his arm. You're not the villain in this story. Neither is she, really. The villain is the one who kept taking and never gave anything back. Linda arrived at the hospital that afternoon. She walked in wearing expensive sunglasses and a silk blouse that looked like it had been ironed that morning, and she stopped in the middle of the corridor with her arms crossed. Where is she? Room 314, Mark said. They're doing another round of tests. You can wait here. Like hell I'm waiting. Linda pushed past him toward the door, but Mark stepped in front of her. Linda. Before you go in there, we need to talk. About what? About how you ambushed me in front of the whole family. About how you had Mom dragged out of her own birthday party like a criminal. Linda's voice had risen. A nurse at the end of the hall looked up from her station. You've got some nerve, Mark. You really do. I've got documentation, Linda. 38 months of transfers from their account to yours. I've got copies of the deeds for the condo, and they show your name, not Mom's. I've got an affidavit from a financial examiner who reviewed the accounts and flagged the withdrawals as irregular. Linda's chin jutted forward. Dad gave me that money. It was his choice. Dad's signature is on the transfers, yes. But Dad also admitted under questioning that he didn't read any of the documents you gave him. He signed what you put in front of him because he trusted you. Mark's voice was quiet, but it carried. That's not consent. That's exploitation. The word hung in the air. Linda's face went through several expressions in quick succession: shock, anger, and then something that looked almost like fear. You can't prove that, she said. It's just your word against mine. It's my word plus bank statements, email correspondence, and a sworn statement from Dad's financial advisor who warned him not to make large transfers from the joint account without consulting Mom. Mark stepped closer to his sister. I don't want to take you to court, Linda. I don't want to make this any more public than it already is. But I will, if you force me to. Linda looked past him, toward the door to Irene's room. Her jaw worked as she gritted her teeth. What do you want? I want the condo returned. I want the full accounting of every dollar you took. And I want you to sign a power of attorney that gives me control of Mom's medical and financial decisions going forward. Never. Then I'll see you in court. Mark turned away from her and walked back toward me. Linda stood frozen in the middle of the corridor, her designer bag clutched against her chest, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. She did not follow us. I heard her footsteps retreat toward the elevator, and when the doors closed behind her, the corridor fell silent again. Mark stood beside me, his hands shoved into his pockets. She'll file a motion within the week, he said. She'll claim I'm acting in bad faith. She'll drag Dad into it and make him choose sides. Let her, I said. You have the evidence. You have the doctors. You have me. He looked at me then, and the tension in his shoulders eased just a little. I do have you, he said. That's the only thing I've been sure about this entire time. We went back into Irene's room. She was dozing in the bed, her face peaceful in sleep, the lines of anger smoothed away by exhaustion. I pulled the blanket up over her shoulders and tucked the edge beneath her chin. It was a small gesture, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But when she stirred briefly and murmured something I could not quite hear, I found myself hoping she had understood, somewhere in her sleep, that someone was still watching out for her. And that maybe, after everything that had happened, there was still a chance for her to realize it before it was too late. That the week after the poverty passed in a blur of hospital visits and phone calls. Irene moved to the transitional CA facility in Buckhead on Wednesday, and Mark spent the entire day filling out paperwork and meeting with the intake coordinator. I stayed with Irene in her new room, unpacking the small bag of clothes and toiletries Mark had brought from the house. The facility smelled like lavender and floor polish. The walls were painted a soft beige, and the windows looked out onto a small courtyard with a fountain in the center. It was pleasant enough, as institutional places went, but Irene refused to look at anything except the television mounted on the wall. She watched a King show with the volume turned low, and when I tried to talk to her, she answered in monosyllables. By Friday, Linda had not called or visited. Tom had come once, on Wednesday evening, and had stood awkwardly by Irene's bed for 20 minutes before making an excuse about needing to feed the cat. Irene had barely acknowledged, and Mark took the news about his father in stride. He's never been good with hospitals. He shows up, he stands there, he leaves. That's his way of coping. His wife is in a CA facility, and he comes for 20 minutes. He's SCA red, Rachel. He knows he messed up by letting Linda take the money. But admitting that means admitting he failed. And Tom doesn't do failure. Mark leaned against the kitchen counter, stirring a cup of coffee that had gone cold. He'll come around eventually. Or he won't. Either way, I can't make him CA ring more than he's capable of CA ring. That blunt assessment stung more than I expected. Tom had always seemed like a harmless presence in the family, a quiet man who followed Irene's lead and kept his opinions to himself. But his silence over the ERS had been a kind of complicity. He had watched Linda take and take, and he had signed every form she put in front of him. He was not innocent. On Saturday morning, a certified letter arrived in the mail. Mark opened it at the breakfast table, read it silently, and then slid it across to me. The letter was from Linda's lawyer. It was 4 pages of dense legal language, but the gist was clear. Linda was filing a motion to challenge Mark's guardianship petition on the grounds that he had misrepresented Irene's medical condition and had acted without proper consultation with other family members. She was also seeking an injunction to prevent Mark from accessing the joint account. She's going for the money, Mark said. She knows she can't stop the guardianship entirely, but she can tie it up in court for months. Meanwhile, the bank accounts stay frozen, and she keeps the condo. I read through the legal jargon again, trying to parse the meaning. Can she do that? She can try. But the judge is going to look at the bank statements and the medical records and see what's really going on. Mark folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt pocket. I'm not worried. I'm just tired. He looked tired. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and he had lost weight in the past week. I made him eat a piece of toast, even though he said he was not hungry, and I watched him chew it mechanically, ring at the wall. Let me handle Linda, I said. Mark looked up. What? I'll call her. I'll meet her somewhere and talk to her without the lawyers. She might say things to me that she wouldn't say to you. I pushed my plate aside. It's worth a shot. The worst that happens is she yells at me and I leave. Mark's expression shifted from surprise to concern. Rachel, you don't have to do this. I've already got the legal process moving. I can protect Mom's assets without getting you involved in Linda's drama. Maybe I want to be involved. Maybe I'm tired of sitting on the sidelines. I reached across the table and took his hand. I've been the quiet daughter-in-law for 5 years. I let her pick at me and never fought back. But this isn't just about her picking at me anymore. This is about your mother's health and your family's money. I can help. Mark was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, if you're sure. I'm sure. I called Linda that afternoon. She answered on the second ring, her voice guarded. What do you want? I want to talk to you. In person. No lawyers, no recordings, no drama. Just the two of us. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, short and quick. Why should I agree to that? Because if you don't, we're going to court and you're going to lose. I've seen the documents, Linda. I know what they show. I kept my voice even. But before we get to that point, I think there are things we should say to each other. Things that might change how this ends. Another pause. Then she said, tomorrow. 10 in the morning. The coffee shop on Peachtree, by the old theater. I'll be there. She hung up before I could respond. I put the phone down and felt my hands start to shake. The conversation had gone better than I had expected, but the anticipation of facing her alone twisted my stomach into knots. Mark was in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper. He looked up when I walked in. Well, she agreed. Tomorrow morning. Peachtree Street. He set the paper down and stood up. I'll come with you. I'll sit at another table, out of sight, in case she tries anything. No. I need her to believe we're alone. If she sees you, she'll shut down. I walked over to him and put my hands on his chest. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. He did not look convinced, but he nodded. If she does anything, she won't. She's red, Mark. That's the only reason she agreed to meet. She wants to see if I have anything she can use against us. I leaned into him, letting his warmth settle against me. I'll be fine. I've handled worse than Linda in my life. He put his arms around me and held me close. I know you have. That's why I ma ride you. The coffee shop on Peachtree was small and quiet, with worn wooden tables and a chalkboard menu behind the counter. I arrived 5 minutes early and ordered a black coffee. Linda walked in at exactly 10 o'clock, dressed in a tailored blazer and arcade jeans, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked like she had come from a business meeting. She sat across from me without ordering anything. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for hidden cameras or witnesses. I told you, I'm alone, I said. Forgive me if I don't take your word for it. She folded her hands on the table. What do you want, Rachel, besides to gloat? I'm not gloating. I'm here to offer you a way out. Linda's eyebrows rose. A way out? You have a choice. You can keep fighting Mark in court, spend thousands on legal fees, and probably lose anyway. Or you can agree to return the condo and pay back the money you took, and we can settle this without going to trial. She laughed, short and bitter. That's what you call a way out. Handing everything over? It's better than what will happen if you don't. Mark has enough evidence to prove you exploited your parents. That's fraud, Linda. That's jail time. The word hit her like a physical blow. Her composure cracked, just for a second. Then she pulled herself back together. You're bluffing. Am I? I leaned forward. I know about the NICU. I know Mom almost lost you when you were a baby, and she's been terrified of losing you ever since. I know she gave you everything because she thought she had to prove something to herself, to the universe, to whatever she believed was trying to take you away from her. And I know you took advantage of that fear. Linda's hands tightened on the table. For a moment, I thought she was going to stand up and leave. But she stayed. I'm not the villain you think I am, she said, her voice quieter now. I'm not. I just needed help. I was in debt, Rachel. I was drowning, and I didn't know who else to ask. Mom had the money, and she wanted to give it to me. She offered. I didn't steal it. Maybe she offered. But she's sick, Linda. She can't make decisions like that anymore. And Dad didn't understand what he was signing. You knew that. The accusation hung in the air. Linda looked down at the table, her carefully controlled facade finally showing cracks. I didn't know how bad she was, she said. I thought she just had some memory issues. I didn't think it was serious. I wouldn't have if I'd known. I wanted to believe her. Part of me even did. She was human, and humans were good at lying to themselves about the harm they caused. But the bank statements did not lie, and neither did the evidence of years of neglect. That's the problem, I said. You didn't ask. You didn't check. You just took what was offered and assumed everything was fine. That's not love, Linda. That's greed disguised as convenience. She flinched. It was a small movement, barely visible, but I caught it. What do you want me to do? She asked. Sign the document Mark sent. Return the condo, start making restitution, and agree to the guardianship. That's the only way you avoid a criminal investigation. Linda read at me for a long moment. Then she said, if I sign, what happens to me? What happens to my relationship with Mom? Mom will still be your mother. She'll still love you, probably more than is good for her. But she'll be safe, and she'll be cared for. And you'll be able to visit her without lawyers and court dates getting in the way. The coffee shop's door chimed as a customer walked in, and we both turned to look. It was not Mark, just a man in a business suit ordering a latte to go. Linda looked back at me. Her eyes were wet, though she was not crying. You don't trust me. I don't. But I'm giving you a chance to prove I can. She picked up her purse and stood. I'll think about it. That's all I can promise. Think fast, I said. The court hearing is next Friday. If you haven't signed by then, MARK is moving forward with full prosecution. She walked out without looking back. The door swung shut behind her, and I sat alone at the table, staring at her empty chair. MARK read a few minutes later, sliding into the seat Linda had vacated. How did it go? She's read. I think she might take the deal. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into my palms. But I'm not sure she believes me. About what? About still being part of this family. I told her she could still visit Mom, still have a relationship, if she signed. I don't know if she'd that party. She was too focused on the threat. MARK reached across the table and covered my hands with his. You did what you could. The rest is up to her. We sat in the coffee shop for a while longer, not talking, just breathing. The morning sun streamed through the windows and landed on the worn wooden floor in rectangles. I thought about Irene in her facility, watching king shows and refusing to eat. I thought about Tom in his empty house, pretending everything was fine. And I thought about Linda, driving home alone, carrying the weight of everything she had done and everything she still had to decide. MARK squeezed my hands gently. Let's go see Mom. Maybe she's having a better day today. We left the coffee shop and walked toward the car. The air was crisp and ciel, and the leaves on the trees had root to turn. It was November now, and the world was preparing for winter. The transitional CARE facility was quiet when we arrived. Irene was sitting in the courtyard, wrapped in a blanket, watching the fountain. Her color was better than it had been a few days ago, and she turned her head when we approached. MARK, she said. Rachel. You're here. Of course we are, MARK said, pulling up a chair beside her. We're always here. Irene looked at me, and for a moment, her expression was almost soft. Your hands are cold, she said. You should have worn gloves. I smiled and sat down on the bench beside her. I forgot. Always forgetting things, Irene said, but there was no sharpness in her voice. It was almost a joke, and I found myself laughing softly. MARK looked at me over Irene's head, and his eyes were warm. For the first time in days, I felt like something was beginning to shift. Not fully resolved, not yet, but a tiny piece of the burden had lifted. Linda would make her choice. Tom would have to confront his own complicity. Irene would continue to heal, or she would not. But we were here, together, and that counted for more than I had realized. Mom, I said, when you're feeling better, we should take a trip. Just the three of us. Maybe to the mountains. The leaves are beautiful this time of year. Irene looked at me, surprised. Then she nodded slowly. I'd like that, she said. I'd like that very much. MARK reached over and took my hand, and I let myself believe, just for a moment, that everything was going to be all right. The mountain trip never happened. 3 days after my meeting with Linda, Tom showed up at our front door with a suitcase and a look of defeat that I had never seen on his face before. He stood on the porch with his hands shoved into the pockets of his raincoat, not meeting either of our eyes. I can't stay in that house anymore, he said. Everything reminds me of her. The kitchen, the bedroom, the empty chair at the table. I keep walking into rooms and expecting to see her sitting there. MARK stepped aside to let him in. You could have called ahead. We would have had the guest room ready. I didn't know I was coming until I was already in the car. I just route driving and ended up here. Tom shuffled inside, his shoes scuffing against the floor. He looked older than he had at the party, his posture stooped, his hair thinner. The past 2 weeks had aged him. I made coffee and sat with them at the kitchen table while Tom talked. He told us about the silence in the house, the way the phone never rang anymore, the way the neighbors avoided his eyes when he went to check the mail. Linda had not called him since the Pa Rudy. Irene had not called him since she moved to the facility. He was alone in a way he had never been before. I should have stopped her, he said, sta ring into his coffee cup. Linda. I should have said no. But she always had a way of making me feel like I was being unfair when I questioned her. She'd say I didn't trust her, that I was treating her like a child. And I'd back down. Mark was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You could have told me what was happening. Instead, you just signed whatever she put in front of you and pretended everything was fine." I know I should have. But I was embarrassed, Mark, ashamed that I'd let things get so out of hand. I thought if I just kept my head down, it would all work itself out. Tom's voice cracked. I was wrong. I got up and put a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, then relaxed. You're here now, I said. That counts. Mark looked at me, then at his father. Dad, I'm not going to pretend I'm not angry. I am. You let Mom down. You let me down. But I'm not going to throw you out. You can stay here as long as you need to. We'll figure it out. The relief on Tom's face was palpable. His shoulders sagged, and he let out a long, shaky breath. Thank you, he said. Thank you both. We set up the guest room with fresh sheets and a stack of towels. Tom unpacked his small suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed, looking around the room like he was trying to remember how to be in a place that did not belong to him. Over the next few days, Tom settled into a routine. He woke up early, made coffee, and sat in the living room with the newspaper until visiting hours at the facility sta route. He drove himself to see Irene every afternoon, and he came back quiet and thoughtful, reporting on her progress in ca rifle, measured sentences. She was eating better. She had walked to the courtyard with a nurse. She had asked about the cat. I did not press him for details. He was offering what he could, and that was more than he had given in years. The court hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. On Thursday afternoon, Linda called Mark and told him she had signed the agreement. She would return the condo to the estate and begin making monthly payments toward restitution. She was also willing to sign the guardianship documents, provided Mark agreed to let her visit Irene twice a month. You can visit whenever you want, Mark said into the phone. I've never tried to keep you away from her. That's been your decision, not mine. There was a long pause on Linda's end. Then she said, in a voice so soft I could barely hear it, "Is she angry at me?" I don't know. You'll have to ask her. They hung up, and Mark set the phone on the table with a heavy sigh. She signed. It's done. I wrapped my arms around him from behind and pressed my cheek against his back. That's good. That means we can focus on Mom now instead of fighting about money. It means she saw the writing on the wall. That's all it means. But he leaned back into me, and I felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Still. It's a step. We went to the facility together that evening. Irene was in her room, sitting in an armchair by the window. She was wearing her own clothes, a soft cardigan and comfortable slacks, and her hair had been brushed and pinned back. She looked more like herself than she had in weeks. Mom, Mark said, Linda called today. She signed the agreement. She's going to give back the condo. Irene did not react right away. She read out the window at the darkening sky, her hands folded in her lap. Then she said, "She called you but not me. She said she'd come visit soon." She wants to see you. She just needs a little time. I've been here for 2 weeks. Time hasn't helped her pick up the phone. Irene's voice was flat, but I could hear the hurt beneath it. She knows I'm here. She knows where I am. And she hasn't come. Mark walked over and knelt beside her chair. I know. I'm not making excuses for her. But she signed the papers. That's something. It means she's rooting to understand what she did. Irene turned to look at him. And what about you? Do you understand what you did? The question hung in the air. Mark held her gaze. I understand that I had to do something you wouldn't do for yourself. I understand that it hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry for protecting you. Irene was silent. Then she reached out and touched his face, her fingers light against his cheek. You're a good son, Mark. You always have been. I just didn't tell you enough. His eyes glistened, but he held back the tears. You're a good mother, too. You just made some bad choices. We all do. It was not a full reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Later that night, back at the house, I lay awake beside Mark and listened to the sound of his breathing. The house was quiet, the guest room dark and silent, Tom asleep in the bed across the hallway. Rachel, Mark said, his voice low and sleepy. Are you awake? Yeah. I think I'm going to start looking for a house for Dad and Mom. Something smaller, closer to the facility. I don't want Dad to be alone in that big house anymore, and I don't think Mom is coming back to it. Where are you thinking? The area around the facility has some older homes that are being renovated. A bungalow with a yard and a porch. Something they can manage without having to climb stairs. I rolled onto my side to face him. That's a big decision. It is. But I've been thinking about it for a while. I can't keep paying for the facility forever, and Dad can't stay here indefinitely. This way, they're together, but Mom still gets the care she needs. He paused. I also want to ask you something. What if I buy this house? I want to put it in your name. Not mine. Not theirs. Yours. I sat up in bed. Mark, that's too much, I know. But I've been thinking, and I realized something. You've been part of this family for 5 years, and I've never given you anything that was just yours. Everything we have together. But this house for my parents, I want it to be yours. So if anything ever happens, if I get sick, if we ever have trouble, you have something that no one can take away from you. I read at him in the darkness. Mark, I know you don't need it. That's not the point. The point is I want to give you something that says I trust you. Completely. Without reservation. He reached out and found my hand in the dark. You've been with me through everything. The bad job, the money trouble, the whole mess with my family. You never once asked for anything in return. I want to give you this. I lay back down beside him, my heart pounding in my chest. Okay, I said. Okay. But only if you let me help pay for it. He laughed softly. You're not going to let me do this alone, or you never. We lay in the dark, holding hands, and I thought about the future. The bungalow with a porch and a road, Irene and Tom, together again. Linda, making her slow, uncertain steps toward redemption. And me, standing at the center of it all, no longer a footnote in someone else's story. The next morning, Tom drove to the facility early. Mark and I followed a few hours later, and we found Irene sitting in the courtyard with Tom beside her. She was wearing a new scarf, a soft shade of blue that brought out her eyes, and she was smiling at something he had just said. "Look who's here," Tom said, waving us over. "I was just telling your mother about the bungalow. She thinks it's a good idea." Irene nodded. "I like the idea of a road. I've always wanted a garden." "We'll plant roses," I said, sitting down beside her. "And maybe some lavender. It grows well in Georgia." She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the woman she had been before everything fell apart. The capable, competent matriarch who had run a household and raised 2 children and held her family together through years of quiet struggle. She was still in there, hiding behind the confusion and the fear, but she was not gone. "I would like that," she said. "I would like lavender." Tom reached over and took her hand. "We'll plant it together. Me and you. And we'll sit on the porch and watch it grow." Mark leaned over and whispered in my ear, "I found the house. It's on Maple Street, 6 blocks from the facility. I'm going to look at it tomorrow after work. Want to come?" I nodded, unable to speak. The TRS had risen too quickly for words, and I blinked them back as best I could. The sun was warm on my shoulders, and the fountain murmured in the center of the courtyard road. Irene's hand rested in Tom's, and Tom's other hand rested on the arm of his chair. Mark stood behind me, his hand on my shoulder, steady and solid. We were not whole. We were still broken in a dozen different ways, and there were still wounds that would take years to heal. But we had found each other again, in the middle of the wreckage, and that was something worth holding on to. The next day, Mark and I drove to Maple Street and pulled up in front of a small bungalow with a wraparound porch and a yard that was overgrown with weeds. The realtor met us there, and we walked through the empty rooms, our footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors. "It needs work," Mark said, running his hand along the windowsill. "New paint, new kitchen cabinets, probably a new roof. But the bones are good." I walked into the backyard and stood in the middle of the weedy grass, looking up at the sky. The sun was bright, and the breeze smelled like autumn and damp. I could see Irene's garden taking shape in my mind, rows of lavender and roses, a trellis for climbing vines, a bench in the corner where she could sit and read. "We'll fix it up together," I said, turning back to look at Mark, "you and me and Tom. And when it's ready, we'll bring them home." Mark walked across the yard and stood beside me. "Home," he repeated. "I like the sound of that." We put in an offer that afternoon. It was accepted the next day. And we route planning the renovation, sketching out floor plans and color palettes and trying to guess which cabinets Irene would like best. It was not a perfect ending. There were still difficult conversations ahead, and Linda had not fully committed to the process of rebuilding. But for the first time in months, I felt like we were moving forward instead of just surviving. And that was enough. More than enough, really. The renovation of the bungalow route the week before Thanksgiving. Mark took time off from work, and Tom showed up every morning with a thermos of coffee and a willingness to learn. The 3 of us spent long days stripping wallpaper, sanding floors, and arguing about paint colors. I learned more about my father-in-law in those weeks than I had in 5 years of marriage. Tom was meticulous with detail. He measured twice before cutting anything, and he insisted on lining up the gazebo ards with a level even when it took 3 times as long. He also told me stories about Irene that I had never heard before, stories from their early marriage, from the days when they were young and poor and still discovering each other. "She was the one who picked this neighborhood," he said one afternoon, stepping back to admire a freshly painted wall. "We'd been looking at houses for weeks, and nothing felt right. Then we drove down Maple Street, and she just knew. She said, 'This is it, Tom. This is where we're going to grow old.'" I looked at the room around us, the fresh white paint, the wide windows, the afternoon light slanting across the floor. She was right. She usually was. Tom's voice was soft, almost wistful. I don't think I told her that enough. She was always right about the big things, and I let her carry the weight of that without ever saying thank you. We're fixing that now, I said. You're here. You're helping. That counts. He nodded and returned to his measuring tape, but I saw the dampness in his eyes before he turned away. Mark focused on the kitchen, tearing out old cabinets and installing new ones. I helped him with the tile backsplash, a soft blue subway pattern that Irene had admired in a catalog. We worked side by side, passing tiles and spacers in grout, and I found myself enjoying the rhythm of it, the quiet intimacy of building something together. Linda called yesterday, Mark said, not looking up from the tile cutter. Did she wants to come help. Said she's been taking some time to think, and she'd like to be part of the project. He set down the tile cutter and wiped his hands on his jeans. I told her we'd be here on Saturday if she wants to come by. I paused with a tile in my hand. How do you feel about that? I'm not sure. Part of me wants to say no, to keep her out of it. She's burned us too many times. He looked at me, his expression uncertain. But the other part of me remembers that she's still my sister. And Mom still loves her. Maybe it's worth trying. Then we try. I pressed the tile into place and stepped back to check the alignment. If she shows up and helps, great. If she makes trouble, she leaves. We set the terms. Mark nodded slowly. That sounds fair. Saturday arrived with gray skies and a chill wind. I was in the living room sanding the window frame when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked out and saw Linda's silver sedan, the same one she had driven to the parking next to Mark's truck. She got out slowly, as if bracing herself. She wore old jeans and a worn-out sweatshirt, no makeup, no jewelry. I almost didn't recognize her. Hey, she said, when I opened the front door. I brought donuts. She held up a white box, still warm from the bakery. I took it from her and stepped aside. Come in. We're in the kitchen. Linda walked through the house, looking at the progress we had made. She ran her fingers along the newly painted walls and peered into the bathroom where Mark was installing a new sink. She seemed smaller than she had at the less polished, more human. Mark, she said, her voice tentative. I'm here. He turned off the water and straightened up. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then he crossed the room and pulled her into a hug, a brief, tight embrace that said more than words could have. I'm glad you came, he said. Linda nodded, her eyes shiny. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. Neither was I said from the doorway. But you showed up. That's a start. We spent the morning working together. Linda painted the hallway, a soft sage green that she had picked out from the paint store. Tom worked on the porch, reinforcing the railings. Mark finished the sink, and I root painting the trim in the bedroom. At lunchtime, we sat on the back steps with coffee and sandwiches, looking out at the overgrown road. The weeds were still there, but I had root clearing a patch near the fence, and I could already imagine the lavender and roses. I used to love gardening, Linda said, out of nowhere. When I was a kid, Mom and I would plant marigolds along the driveway every spring. She'd let me pick out the colors, and I'd spend hours arranging them. I remember that, Tom said. You'd get your hands all dirty and track mud into the kitchen. Irene would yell at you, and you'd promise to clean up, and then you'd do it all over again the next day. Linda smiled, a small, genuine smile. I was a handful. Still Mark said, but there was no edge in his voice. Linda looked at him, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that I could not fully access. They had a history I would never know, decades of sibling rivalry and share-read memories, and watching them find their way back to each other was like watching a slow, refill dance. Mark, Linda said, I want to apologize. Not just for the money, but for everything. For being difficult at every family gathering. For making Rachel feel like she didn't belong. She looked at me. I've been jealous of you, I think. You've got something I've never had. You're steady, Rachel. You show up. You don't run away. I didn't know what to say. The honesty in her voice was unexpected, almost disarming. Thank you, I managed. That means a lot. I'm not saying I'll be perfect, Linda continued. I'm probably going to mess up again. I'm probably going to say things I shouldn't. But I want to try. I want to be better. For Mom, and for you guys. Tom reached over and patted her knee. That's all any of us can do, sweetheart. Just try. The afternoon wore on, and we made good progress. By the time the sun route to set, the hallway was painted, the bathroom was functional, and the front porch had new railings. Linda had left, promising to come back the next weekend with more donuts and a willingness to help in the garden. Mark and I sat on the porch steps after everyone had gone, watching the sky turn pink and orange above the maple trees. The bungalow looked different now, more alive, more like it was ready to hold a family again. She's going to be okay, Mark said. I think. She's still Linda, so she'll always be a little bit of a disaster. But she's trying. Trying matters, I said. It's more than she was doing before. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and pulled me close. What about you? How are you doing? I leaned into him, letting his warm seep through my jacket. I'm good. Tired, but good. This project has been good for me, Mark. It's given me something to focus on that isn't just the past. Not just the past, he repeated. I like that. What are you focusing on? I thought about it. The future. The garden. Your parents coming home. Maybe even a little bit of my own something that's just mine. Mark was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you know, we talked about the bungalow being in your name. But maybe there's something else we should talk about. Something bigger. I turned to look at him. What do you mean? He took a breath, and I could see him working up to something. I've been thinking about kids. Our kids. I know we've never really talked about it seriously, and I know things have been crazy with my family. But watching Mom and Dad, watching them build a life together and raise a family, and then watching you with them, with all of them, I realized something. I want to have that with you. I want us to have our own people. The words hung in the air between us. The sunset painted everything in shades of gold and amber, and the wind rustled through the weeds in the road. I felt a warm spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. You're serious? I asked. I've never been more serious about anything. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I was going to wait until the house was finished. Until everything was settled. But then I thought, why wait for perfect when we could start building it now? He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not the one I had on my finger, but a different one, smaller and more delicate, with a single diamond in a simple setting. I know we're already married, he said, a little nervously. But I wanted to give you something that said I meant it. That I meant all of it, from the beginning and forever. This was my grandmother's ring. Mom gave it to me after the wedding, and I've been waiting for the right moment. I looked at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. My eyes were wet, and I couldn't seem to find my voice. Rachel, he said, I'm asking you to marry me again. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Every single day, I want to choose you. Will you let me? I laughed, a wet, choked sound that was half sob and half joy. Yes, I said. Of course, yes. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, next to my wedding band, and it fit perfectly. Then he leaned in and kissed me, and the sunset painted us both in warm golden light. We stayed on the porch until the stars came out, talking about nothing and everything. The future was still uncertain. There were still challenges ahead, with Linda and Irene and the long road of rebuilding trust. But sitting there in the dark with Mark's hand in mine, I felt like I could handle any of it. Because we were not just surviving anymore. We were building something new, something that belonged to us, and nothing could take that away. The next morning, I went to visit Irene and showed her the ring. She looked at it for a long time, her finger tracing the edge of the band. That was my mother-in-law's, she said softly. She gave it to me when I married Tom. She said it was for strength, for carrying the weight of a family. She looked up at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She would have loved you, Rachel. She would have been so proud. I took her hand and squeezed it gently. Thank you, Mom. That means the world. You've been good for this family, she went on. Better than we deserved. And I know I haven't always said that, but I want you to know it now, while I can still remember to say it. Mom, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be planting roses in that bungalow by spring. I hope so, she said. I really hope so. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like hope was exactly the right thing to have. Winter came to Atlanta with a cold snap that froze the weeds in the yard and kept us indoors for most of December. The bungalow renovation slowed but never stopped. Mark and I worked on the interior, painting trim and hanging curtains, while Tom focused on the small details he loved best. He installed a new mailbox and hung a bird feeder by the kitchen window, and he spent hours standing at the glass, waiting for the cardinals to arrive. Irene's condition had stabilized. The doctors adjusted her medication, and she root physical therapy twice a week. She was walking with a cane now, slowly and carefully, but she was walking. The staff at the facility reported that she was participating in group activities and even making friends with some of the other residents. She asked about the garden again, Tom reported one evening. He had just returned from his daily visit, his cheeks red from the cold. She wants to know if we're still going to plant lavender. Tell her we're planting the lavender in the spring, I said. And we're putting roses along the fence. She can pick the colors. Tom smiled, a rare and genuine expression. She'll like that. She used to have roses in our old road, pink ones, with the climbing trellis. She spent hours out there. Linda came by every weekend now, and I had stopped waiting for her to do something wrong. The skepticism I had carried since the poverty had begun to fade, replaced by something more cautious but not unwelcoming. She brought donuts and coffee, and she worked beside us without complaint. She had even root helping with the garden, clearing the overgrown beds and turning the soil for spring planting. You're good at this, I said one Saturday afternoon, watching her work. She had stripped off her jacket and was kneeling in the dirt, her hands black with soil. Gardening, I used to think I hated it. But now it's kind of nice. Quiet, no one yelling at you about anything. Linda, no one yells at you. She looked up with a wry grin. You haven't met my husband. He's a great guy, but he yells when he's stressed. And he's been stressed a lot lately. Our finances are a mess, and he's blaming himself for not catching it earlier. We've been fighting. I sat down on the grass beside her. I'm sorry. That's hard. It's okay. We're working on it. He's agreed to see a counselor, and I'm going too. She paused, pulling a weed from the soil. It's actually kind of nice to be here. Away from all that. Just digging in the dirt. There's something to it, I agreed. It puts things in perspective. She nodded, and we worked in silence for a while. The winter sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. A favoritism landed on the bird feeder, and we both watched it peck at the seeds. Rachel, Linda said, after a long pause. I never apologized to you properly. For the Pa Rudy. For everything I said about you over the years. You've been apologizing by showing up, I said. That counts. I know it does. But I want to say it anyway. She set down her trowel and turned to face me. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about a lot of things. I thought you were just some woman who married my brother for his money, and I resented you for it. But you're not that. You're the one who held everything together when it fell apart. You made my brother stronger. You made my mother stronger. And you even made me stronger, even when I didn't want to be. I didn't know what to say. The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. You don't have to forgive me, she continued. I'm not asking for that. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see who you really are. The favoritism flew away, and the RD fell silent again. I looked at Linda, kneeling in the dirt with her hands black and her face open, and I felt something shift inside me. A wall I had built without realizing it, a wall of caution and self-protection, rooting to crumble. Thank you, I said. I'm not sure I can say I forgive you yet. But I'm glad you told me that. That's fair. That's more than I deserve. We got back to work, pulling weeds and turning soil, and the silence between us was comfortable rather than awkward. It was a beginning, slow and tentative, but real. The week before Christmas, Tom made a decision that surprised everyone. He invited Linda and her husband to Christmas dinner at the bungalow. The house wasn't finished yet, but the living room had furniture and a working fireplace, and the kitchen had a table large enough for 6. It's time, he said, when Mark asked him about it. We've been carrying this anger for too long. Linda's trying, and I want to meet her halfway. And I want to meet her husband, too. I haven't seen him since the wedding, and that was years ago. Mark looked at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded. All right, Mark said. We'll do it. Christmas dinner at the bungalow. Christmas Day dawned cold and bright. I spent the morning in the kitchen, making a roast chicken and all the sides. Tom set the table with the good china, the set that had been sitting in storage for years. Mark built a fire in the fireplace, and the room filled with the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat. Linda and her husband arrived at noon. He was tall and quiet, with a kind face and a nervous smile. He shook Mark's hand and hugged Tom, and when he met me, he said, Linda talks about you a lot. She says you're the best thing that ever happened to this family. I glanced at Linda, who was pretending to be very interested in the Christmas tree. She said that probably not in those exact words, he admitted. But that was the gist. I laughed and directed him to the living room, where Tom was already pouring drinks. Linda hovered in the kitchen doorway, looking uncertain. You did good, I told her. Inviting him. Coming here. All of it. This is weird, she said. All of us together. Not fighting. It is weird. But maybe that's okay. We sat down to dinner at 2:00, and it was the most normal meal we had shared in years. There were no arguments, no passive-aggressive comments, no awkward silences. Tom talked about the bungalow and the garden. Linda talked about her counseling. Mark and her husband discovered they both liked the same baseball team. Irene was not there. The facility had recommended that she stay on site for the holiday, since the stress of travel could set back her recovery. But we had called her that morning, and she had been cheerful and alert. She had asked about the lavender. We'll bring her home soon, Tom said, raising his glass. In the spring, when the garden is ready. To spring, Linda echoed. And to lavender. We all raised our glasses, and the fire crackled in the fireplace, and the room felt warmer than it should have been. I looked at the people around the table, the broken family that had somehow rooted to piece itself back together, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Uncomplicated and simple. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were washed, Mark and I sat on the couch in front of the fire. The bungalow was quiet, and outside the window, snow had rooted to fall. I never thought we'd have this, Mark said. After everything that happened. I thought the family was done. Splintered. Unfixable. Families are never done, I said. They just need time. And maybe a little bit of stubbornness. He pulled me close, and I rested my head on his shoulder. The fire crackled softly, and the snow fell in silent flurries, and for a moment, everything felt exactly right. The next day, we went to visit Irene. She was sitting in her room, wearing a red sweater that Tom had brought her, and she was smiling. Merry Christmas, she said, when we walked in. How was dinner? Perfect, I told her. We missed you. But we'll have you home soon. I'm ready, she said. I'm ready to come home. Mark knelt beside her chair and took her hand. Spring, Mom. That's the plan. The garden will be ready, and so will you. And we'll all be there, waiting. She reached out and touched his face, the same gesture she had made weeks before. My son, she said. My good son. I stood in the doorway and watched them, and I felt the TRS to rise. But they were not sad TRS. They were relief. Gratitude. A kind of peace that I had not known I was capable of feeling. On the drive home, Mark reached over and took my hand. Thank you, he said. For everything. For staying. For being you. Where else would I be? I don't know. Somewhere without all of this, probably. I smiled and squeezed his hand. I told you before. That place doesn't exist. And even if it did, I wouldn't want to go there without you. We drove through the snowy streets, past houses lit up with Christmas lights, and I thought about the year ahead. The bungalow would be finished. The garden would bloom. Irene would come home. And we would be there. Together. Ready for whatever came next. Spring arrived in Atlanta with a burst of dogwood blossoms and warm rains that turned the bungalow yard into a sea bed of green. The weeds we had clear red in winter were replaced by tender new shoots, and the soil was rich and dark, ready for planting. I spent the first weekend of March at the garden center, loading my car with flats of lavender, rose bushes, and bags of compost. Mark helped me unload everything into the road. He had taken the week off work to finish the final touches on the bungalow, and Tom was there every day, sanding, painting, and adjusting. The house was ready. The furniture was in place. The only thing missing was Irene. We'll bring her home next Saturday, Mark said, standing in the middle of the garden with a shovel in his hand. The doctor signed off on her discharge. She's stable enough to be at home with outpatient care. I knelt in the dirt and root digging a hole for the first lavender plant. Is she excited? She's been packing her things for the past 3 days. Linda went to help her, and Mom told her she wanted to bring her knitting and her photo albums and a lamp that she's had since she was married. Mark smiled. She's ready. I pressed the lavender plant into the hole and patted the soil around its roots. The smell of the leaves filled the air, clean and sharp, we're ready too. Linda arrived on Wednesday to help with the garden. She brought her husband, who had taken the week off as well, and the four of us spent the afternoon planting roses along the fence. The pink climbers that Irene had loved in her old yard, the ones Tom had told me about. We placed them carefully, spacing them so they would have room to grow. This feels right, Linda said, wiping dirt from her forehead. This feels like we're actually doing something good. Planting roses is always a good thing, Mark said. I meant more than that. I meant being here. All of us. Working together. She paused, looking at the road. I didn't think we'd ever get to this place. After everything that happened, I thought we were done. I stood up and stretched my back. We were done. But then we root over. Linda nodded, and I saw that she was crying, silent tears running down her cheeks. She wiped them away with the back of her hand. I'm just glad, she said. I'm really glad. Tom came out onto the back porch with a tray of lemonade, and we all stopped to drink and rest in the shade. The yard was transforming before our eyes, the barth becoming something more, something alive. I could already imagine Irene sitting on the porch, watching the roses climb the fence, the lavender swaying in the breeze. Rachel, Tom said, sitting beside me on the steps. I want to say something. I know I've said a lot of things over the past few months, but this one I want to make sure you hear. You changed this family. Not Mark, not Linda, not me. You. You were the one who kept showing up, even when it was hard. You were the one who held us together. I set down my lemonade and looked at him. I just did what I thought was right. That's exactly my point. You did what was right, not what was easy. That takes more courage than most people have. He reached over and patted my hand. I'm proud to have you as a daughter-in-law. I know I haven't said that before. But I want you to know it now. I blinked back. Thank you, Tom. That means a lot. He nodded and returned to his lemonade, and I sat there with the warmth of the spring sun on my face and the smell of fresh yard in my nose, feeling more at home than I had ever felt in that family. Saturday arrived. Clea and Mark drove to the facility to pick up Irene, while Tom, Linda, and I waited at the bungalow. We had decorated the porch with pots of blooming flowers, and the kitchen table was set for a welcome lunch. Linda had made a cake, chocolate with cream cheese frosting, Irene's favorite. She's going to cry, Linda said, pacing the living room. I'm going to cry. Everyone's going to cry. That's fine, I said. Crying is allowed. The car pulled into the driveway at 11 o'clock. I watched Mark get out first, then walk around to the passenger side and open the door. Irene stepped out slowly, using her cane, but she was standing on her own. She looked up at the bungalow, at the porch and the garden and the roses that were already rooting to climb the fence, and her face broke into a wide smile. It's beautiful, she said, as we gathered around her. You did all of this. Rachel did most of the garden, Linda said. I just dug holes. Irene turned to me, and she reached out with her free hand and pulled me into a hug. It was the first time she had ever done that, initiated physical affection without being prompted. I hugged her back, careful not to upset her balance. Thank you, she whispered in my ear. Thank you for everything. Welcome home, Mom, I said. The rest of the day was quiet and perfect. We sat on the porch and ate the cake Linda had made, and Irene told us stories about her own mother's garden, about the roses and the marigolds and the vegetables she had grown as a girl. Tom listened with a soft smile, and Mark took photos with his phone, capturing the moments that felt too precious to forget. As the afternoon wore on, Irene grew tired. Tom helped her into the house, and she settled into the armchair by the window, the one that looked out onto the road. She was asleep within minutes, her head tilted back, her hands folded in her lap. Linda and her husband left around dinner time, hugging everyone and promising to come back next weekend. Mark and I stood on the porch and watched their car drive away, the taillights disappearing into the dusk. It's over, Mark said. The whole thing. The Pa Rudy, the court, the fight. It's over. Not over, I said. Just different. We're different now. He put his arm around my shoulder and pulled me close. I love you, Rachel. I don't think I tell you that enough. You tell me plenty. I want to tell you more. Every day. For the rest of our lives. He turned to face me, his expression serious. This isn't just about my family anymore. This is about us. Our future. What we're going to build together. I leaned into him and rested my head on his chest. Then let's build it. Together. The stars came out slowly, one by one, scattered across the darkening sky. The RD was quiet, the roses settling into their new home, the lavender ready to bloom. Inside the bungalow, Tom was making tea in the kitchen, and Irene was sleeping peacefully in her chair. And I stood on the porch with my husband, watching the night settle around us, and I knew that this was where I belonged. Not because it was perfect. It wasn't. The family still had its scars, and there would be more challenges ahead. But we had Leah and Ed to face them together, and that made all the difference. In the weeks that followed, Irene's health continued to improve. She walked in the garden every morning, leaning on her cane, examining the roses and lavender with the careful attention of a true gardener. She root knitting again, making baby blankets and scarves that she gave to the neighbors. She even root baking, simple things like banana bread and oatmeal pies, filling the bungalow with the smell of home. Linda came every weekend, and her visits were no longer tentative. She brought her husband and sometimes her friends, and she helped in the garden without being asked. The dynamic between us had shifted from warriness to something approaching friendship. Tom had found a new purpose. He took care of the RD, fixed things that broke, and made sure Irene had everything she needed. He had stopped retreating into his quiet shell, and he talked more openly than he ever had before. I heard him laugh more in those spring months than I had heard him laugh in years. Mark and I root talking about our own future. The conversation he had root on the porch that winter had grown into something real, something we both wanted. We looked at houses in the same neighborhood as the bungalow, close enough to be helpful but far enough to have our own space. Maybe not this year, Mark said, as we walked through a small ranch house with a big backyard road, but soon. When we're ready. We're ready, I said. I've been ready for a while. He looked at me, and I saw the same thing in his eyes that I had seen on the porch that night, the same steady love that had carried us through the darkest months. Then let's do it. Let's make a plan. We made the offer on the ranch house that week. It was accepted, and we root the process of buying our first home, a place that was truly ours. Not inherited, not borrowed, not tied to family obligations. Ours. The day we closed on the house was warm and sunny. We went to the bungalow after we RD to tell Irene and Tom, and I had never seen them so happy. A house of your own, Irene said, clasping her hands together. That's wonderful. That's exactly what you deserve. We'll still be close, I promised her. We're not going anywhere. I know. But this is your time now. Yours and Mark's. You've spent so long taking care of the rest of us, and now you get to take care of each other. Mark put his arm around me, and I leaned into him, and the spring light streamed through the windows of the bungalow, warm and golden. Later that evening, I sat on the porch of our new house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. The RD was empty and waiting, ready for our own garden, our own roses, our own lavender. Mark came out and sat beside me, handing me a glass of iced tea. Penny for your thoughts. I was just thinking, I said, about how we got here. All the things that happened. All the things that almost tore us apart. And now I turned to look at him, at the man who had stood up at his mother's birthday party and changed everything. And now I'm glad we went through it. Not because it was easy, but because it made us who we are. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. Who we are. I like that. We sat in silence, watching the stars come out, the first of the fireflies beginning to blink in the road. The future stretched out before us, uncertain and full of possibility. But we were ready for it. Together. Just like we had always been.